LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the February 10th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out the weekend's 17 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. My political comedy sources will both be from last night's Saturday Night Live, including the Meet the Press parody cold open about Jeff Bezos' fight with the National Enquirer that may also be a fight with Donald Trump and have to do with, I think they're calling them explicit photos on a couple of the news analysis programs. That'll be one of the comedy sources. Also, Weekend Update from Saturday Night Live and some quick jokes about the Jeff Bezos situation from Bill Maher in his monologue last Friday on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. The three topics I'm covering, you can see listed down in the video description. They're Trump versus Bezos, Trump versus Democrats, and Adam Schiff's Trump collusion preview will be the last two clips at the end. You can actually follow along on my 17 clips, my list of my 17 clips here. These are kind of my somewhat cryptic notes, but if you follow along, you can kind of see the topic and the speaker in each of the clips. There's actually only a couple clips that are talking about the Democrats, mostly in the news summaries, and then there's one near at the end before the Adam Schiff clips. Also, as usual, the rest of my clips, besides the comedy sources at the beginning, are from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. And it's a little bit weird to see Meet the Press portrayed on Saturday Night Live, and their big joke, of course, was that Meet the Press wasn't going to be able to stop talking about Jeff Bezos' penis. As you can see in the 75-second introduction, I won't show you the entire video, but like all of my videos, you can see the source of all the videos I'm showing at links down in the video description, including the entire Saturday Night Live cold open that I'm going to show you the first 75 seconds of right here.
Welcome to Meet the Press. I'm Chuck Todd, and I'm still figuring out my whole look. As always, I'm joined by some of the leading journalists in the world. Pulitzer Prize-winning writer and columnist for the Washington Post, Eugene Robinson.
Thank you for having me.
Best-selling author and columnist for the Wall Street Journal, Peggy Noonan.
Hi, Chuck.
And political strategist, author, and former chair of the DNC, Donna Brazil.
Great to be here.
All right. Let's start with what everyone's talking about. In a new low for journalism, the National Enquirer was accused this week of blackmailing Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. You're all highly respected journalists, so when all is said and done, what do you think Jeff Bezos' penis is going to look like?
Excuse me?
I know normally high-minded journalists wouldn't talk about something like this, but it does involve the richest man in America and the President of the United States. So, Jeff Bezos' penis. What do you think it's going to look like?
So, as for the ongoing penis jokes, I don't know if that was all that worthwhile. And I don't know, Kyle Mooney did the imitation there of Chuck Todd. Where you'll see Chuck Todd coming up. I was just talking about when I had the Roger Stone, Steve Martin Roger Stone impression the other week, that you're going to actually get to see Roger Stone after seeing Steve Martin. And when does that ever happen? Well, now you get to see Kyle Mooney do his impression of Chuck Todd, and then you'll see Chuck Todd. In fact, one of the weird things about what happened on Meet the Press is they did talk about the Jeff Bezos intimate, explicit photos controversy with the National Enquirer, but they were the only one of the news programs that never even said, like, explicit photos, intimate photos. That's what they were calling it on the other networks. Never even brought up the photos on Meet the Press. And Chuck Todd, when he was introducing the topic, it was Katy on the panel who actually first brought up Saturday Night Live. And you'll see Chuck Todd said something kind of weird at the end of this 55-second Meet the Press clip. You compare the real Chuck Todd to the Kyle Mooney Chuck Todd over here.
Back now with Endgame and the bizarre story of Jeff Bezos, the National Enquirer, Saudi Arabia, the Mueller probe, all into one potentially explosive story here. I'll start with the Jeff Bezos letter on Medium on Thursday, where he writes, several days ago, an AMI, referring to American Media, the parent company of National Enquirer, leader advised us that Mr. Pecker is apoplectic about our investigations for reasons still to be better understood. The Saudi angle seems to hit a particularly sensitive nerve. Katy, this Bezos story, on one hand, it's a story of a billionaire standing up to the National Enquirer, but oh so much more.
We're not on SNL, right?
We're not on SNL.
We're not, okay, good.
I know.
Make sure.
Yes. You're right. Are we even allowed to bring this up thanks to my friends over there at SNL? But anyway.
It does have.
So what was that Chuck Todd said at the end there? It sounded kind of like he said, we're allowed to bring this up thanks to our friends over at SNL. I don't is he saying that because of the SNL sketch, they're allowed to talk about the Jeff Bezos versus National Enquirer issue on Meet the Press? That because they talked about it on all the other news programs. I don't know what exactly was that, some kind of joke. I don't know. Actually, at the end of Meet the Press, in a clip I'm not showing you, Chuck Todd also said his, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. He actually said if it's Sunday, or apparently if it's Saturday Night Live, it's Meet the Press. So he was definitely, I don't know, basking in his newfound infamy. I don't know. Was it infamy? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I have two more political comedy clips before I get to the actual news clips. First is Weekend Update talking both about the blackface scandal in Virginia, which last week I said, oh, well, it's going to be over because Ralph Northam is going to resign. He has no support even amongst the Democrats. Well, there have been several more iterations of this story, which actually get covered on Saturday Night Live here, as well as you'll see how different news summaries in a few minutes focus on different parts of the news from the last week, especially based on who the special guests they have are. Over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, they have the lawyer for David Pecker on, and so they kind of focus on the whole National Enquirer Jeff Bezos story, while over on Face the Nation, they actually have Ralph Northam. Well, Gayle King did an interview with Ralph Northam, and it's going to be on CBS This Morning tomorrow, but they had a preview of it on CBS's Face the Nation, and I'll be showing a clip of that coming up. But first I want to finish up the political comedy clips. Like I said, this covers both the Ralph Northam scandal, the blackface scandal in Virginia, as well as the Jeff Bezos scandal with the National Enquirer. I've done a little bit of editing, but you can see the entire Weekend Update on the Saturday Night Live YouTube channel. There's a link down in the video description, and this is about 2 minutes, 20 seconds of that beginning to Weekend Update over here.
Making jokes about the news can get a little redundant for me. But every so often you see a picture of a governor in blackface, and I'm like, this will be fun. So first, the governor of Virginia admitted to wearing blackface in college for a Michael Jackson costume. By the way, making it the least accurate Michael Jackson costume possible. That would be crazy enough, but then the attorney general was like, you too? Blackface is my jam. And then Liam Neeson was like, blackface? Hold my beer. I don't want to bring this up ever, but for a week I was trying to kill a black dude with a baseball bat. Anywho, so my movie comes out Friday. This has been a tough week.
Virginia Governor Ralph Northam is still refusing to resign after a racist photo from his yearbook surfaced. Okay, but if it was in a yearbook, I mean, how bad could it be? Oh, okay, so very bad. I knew it was a yearbook, but I didn't know the year was 1870. By the way, way, this yearbook is from medical school. These two men are doctors. And Northam claims that neither of these guys is him, which, you know how much crazier it is to have that photo on your yearbook page if you aren't in it? You just threw it into your yearbook page like it was part of your vision board? What was your inspirational quote? Dress like no one's watching. Democrats are now calling for Northam to resign, but the second in line is embroiled in now 2 sexual assault scandals, and the third in line also did blackface. So at this point, maybe Virginia should take a cue from the Oscars and just go without a governor this year. You know? Or they could just come full circle and make it Governor Kevin Hart. Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos claims he was blackmailed by the publisher of the National Enquirer, which he said threatened to publish semi-nude selfies of him. And if you're curious about what Bezos' penis looks like, here's an exclusive preview. I swear to God, when I clicked on this story and the page was loading, I thought the top of Jeff Bezos' head was the top of his penis. And by the way, I want to apologize for this picture I showed you, even though I am showing it to you again right now. This picture is so horrifying, I'm surprised it's not on Governor Northam's yearbook page.
That, like, Slender Man face, was that like a Slender Man reference? That Slender Man-faced Jeff Bezos is kind of disturbing, at least in my opinion. You can let me know what you think down in the comments section. And I thought there were actually some good jokes in there. I edited out the bad jokes. If you want to see the bad jokes, you can click on the link down in the video description, watch the entire video on the Saturday Night Live YouTube channel, and you'll see the parts I didn't like. I especially liked the joke about Kevin Hart should be the governor of Virginia. I thought that came around very nicely. You can let me know. I often am a critic of some of the writing on Saturday Night Live. Like I said, I didn't think the actual skit from the cold open that I showed earlier was that great. You know, just like they just flogged the dick joke idea, or like the idea that they couldn't stop talking about Jeff Bezos' penis, which, as you saw from Saturday Night Live, as you saw from Meet the Press, they never even talked about explicit photos on Meet the Press. So it wasn't, I don't know, I guess it was maybe lampooning the media in general for sensationalizing that part of the story, but I don't know, is that true? Maybe not. But I did get a little bit sick of all the dick jokes. I'm going to give you a very sophisticated dick joke coming up when I show you the lawyer, Elkan Abramowitz, that was the name I was trying to remember, the lawyer for David Pecker. When I show his 2 clips from his interview from George Stephanopoulos on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, that's clip number 10 and 11 if you're following along at home on the clip list. I saw some people said no one likes the clip list, and then one person said, I think it was Talcott Douglas maybe said, we love the clip list. I think it depends on how many people watch the video, but usually like 10 or 20 people download the clip list. That's the people who use the link. Then it's actually on my Patreon page, so maybe some of my patrons download it. I don't know. Who knows? But it's... Some people use it. I use it, of course. That's how I know what to do in the show. And I happen to know that even though those were clips 10 and 11, I am about to show you too many dick jokes, I think, from Bill Maher. He talked about Ralph Northam. I'm not going to show you that part of the monologue. I didn't actually think the monologue was that great. I don't know. There's one joke here that's kind of okay. It's because it's like beyond the dick joke, but they're all pretty much dick jokes about Jeff Bezos and the Amazon situation, which I edited down from Bill Maher's monologue to the 90 seconds that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch together over here.
You're following this so far? So, the Enquirer got hold last week. Did you see these? Oh, my God, they're pretty embarrassing. Of texts from Jeff Bezos showing that he is having an affair with Lauren Sanchez, a TV personality. I don't know what that means. So Jeff Bezos said, hey, the Enquirer did it on the orders of Trump. They're working for Trump. And the Enquirer said, shut up about that. You shut up about that or we're going to show everybody your dick. And they'll know it's your dick, Jeff Bezos, because under the dick, it will say, there are some other dicks that you might enjoy. I know, it's insane. But Bezos' dick is hanging tough because he said, he fired back today. He said, go ahead, show my dick to the world. You can't blackmail me because I'm telling you on you first. So I applaud that. And don't lose faith in democracy, people. This is how it works. So, but I think, isn't the larger question, have dick pics ever worked? I mean, Jeff, I know you're rich, but there's something you should know. There is something in your pants that makes women want to fuck you. Your wallet. And I think that closes that chapter.
So, yeah, like I said, mostly just dick jokes, and that, I guess the wallet joke was okay, but yeah, I saw someone said they don't like when I analyze humor, but I have to analyze the clips or I can't claim that I'm using them through fair use. So that's why I have to do a little bit of analysis on every clip or I don't have a right to use it. So sorry about that. But then there was also that thing like if you saw the Jeff Bezos dick pic, it would be that there would be like, if you like this dick, you might also like these other dicks or whatever. And I thought that there actually would have been, let me see if I can get this image here real quick. That's why I was late coming back from the clip, because, unknown PNG. Well, let's see if that works. I didn't see anyone make this joke, but I've been like making this joke for years. Every time I get an Amazon package, oh, I don't know. This looks like it's kind of small, but you know the little like swoosh underneath the Amazon symbol? I always call that the Amazon penis, if you can see it here. Like that little swoosh under the A there. I've always thought that was like, I always say Amazon penis whenever I seen that. So I don't know why. That's what I imagine Jeff Bezos' dick must look like. But that, oh, and I promised you my own sophisticated dick joke. That wasn't even it, but I guess that was kind of a sophisticated dick joke. But the sophisticated dick joke I promised you will come up for clips 10 and 11, the David Pecker attorney. But before I get to that, I want to show you the news summaries. And I actually have news summaries from all 5 of the big 5 corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. Did I say all 5? I think I did. You can go back and listen. Did I miss one? I think I said all 5. But the first one I want to show you, usually the most detailed, and usually the longest, as usual. Well, this time it is the longest, is the Meet the Press news summary. But it's kind of interesting. It's mostly about the Democrats. That's one of the news developments this week, and that's why if you are reading along on your clip list, this is clip 5, and it's actually under the category Dem, not Trump. Trump seems to be the topic of too many of my clips over the last couple of years. But this is about the Democrats, because, you know, if you look at the title of my video, it's Trump versus Bezos, ? And then Democrats, ! Because there are more and more Democrats taking on Trump in various different ways, both in the shutdown border wall negotiations, and more Democrats declaring for president. Elizabeth Warren this week, as you'll see in this news summary coming up from NBC's Meet the Press, and Amy Klobuchar just today, and later, clip number, clip number 15, I'll have the mayor of Indiana, an actual candidate for president, Pete Buttigieg, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, Buttigieg. I don't know if you'll be hearing that name more and more. I think he may actually be running for vice president, because he's like from the Midwest, but he's also gay, and, well, whatever. I'll talk about that a little more when I get to clip number 15, the Buttigieg clip. But now, like I said, I want to get to the NBC Meet the Press news summary about how the Democrats are divided, but they're coming for Trump, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Sunday morning, from the moment Donald Trump rode down that escalator in 2015, Republicans have been engaged in a debate. What does it mean to be a Republican? Well, now the
sorry. One thing I wanted to say is, and I'll restart the clip in just a second, is you notice the Saturday Night Live Meet the Press parody, they pretended they were starting right at the beginning of Meet the Press, but then they go right to the panel, and that never happens. What happens, this is the very beginning of Meet the Press, and it always goes to like Chuck Todd giving his like little news summary that's live about what happened in the week, and then almost always he puts it over to the pre-recorded video package, and I actually have that described in my clip list notes. And now I will actually start the 4-minute, 2-second news summary from Meet the Press, mostly about the Democrats over here.
Sunday morning, from the moment Donald Trump rode down that escalator in 2015, Republicans have been engaged in a debate. What does it mean to be a Republican? Well, now the 2020 field is taking shape. Elizabeth Warren announced yesterday, and Amy Klobuchar is expected to do so today. And Democrats are engaged in an equal and opposite debate. What does it mean to be a Democrat? Is it someone who supports raising taxes on the super wealthy, environmental activism, or Medicare for all? Think of Democrats like Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Kamala Harris. Or is it a more pragmatic Democrat, a deal maker, acceptable to the left, who can appeal to working-class white voters as well as the suburban voters who handed Democrats the House? Think Klobuchar, Joe Biden, Sherrod Brown, or Michael Bennet. My guest in just a few minutes. In short, it's a battle between the incremental and the audacious. The audacious part was greeted with cheers on the left this week with the unveiling of the environmental Green New Deal by the progressives' newest superstar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That same announcement was greeted with cheers on the right as Republicans see an opportunity to accuse Democrats of threatening to turn the United States into some socialist dystopia. In the end, Democratic voters may have to answer this question. Are they looking for a candidate who's aligned perfectly with them ideologically? Or are they just looking for anyone who can beat President Trump?
I say it's time to fight back.
Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren is the latest candidate to formally jump in to a widening Democratic field.
I'm running.
I'm running.
I'm running.
I'm running. I'm running. And already, Democratic voters are weighing whether electability can coexist with unwavering progressive positions on issues from universal health care to raising taxes on the wealthy to a Green New Deal.
Who of us has not had that situation where you got to wait for approval and the doctor says, well, I don't know if your insurance company is going to cover this? Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
When California Senator Kamala Harris sounded open to eliminating private health insurance in order to achieve Medicare for all, she raised the profile of an issue that is already drawing a dividing line between progressives,
52% of Republicans support Medicare for all,
and more centrist Democrats.
You could never afford that. You're talking about trillions of dollars.
I want to improve people's lives today. And if I know Congress won't pass Medicare for all.
Then there's Warren's wealth tax on some millionaires.
An ultra-millionaires tax to make sure that rich people start doing their part for the country that made them rich.
I think the Constitution lets you impose income taxes only, so it probably is unconstitutional.
And this week,
we are outlining the Green New Deal.
Many 2020 Democrats rushed to embrace it.
Green New Deal. Green New Deal.
The brilliance of the Green New Deal.
Oh, it's impractical. Oh, it's too expensive. Oh, it's all of this. If we used to govern our dreams that way, we would have never gone to the moon. God, that's impractical. You see that ball in the sky?
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, perhaps mindful of defending swing districts in 2020, called it the Green Dream, telling Politico, nobody knows what it is, but they're for it, right? And conservatives, led by President Trump, have pounced, reviving an old trope from decades ago.
America will never be a socialist country.
On our Hannity watch, the rise of socialism.
Socialism.
Creeping socialism.
Michael Bloomberg argues a centrist candidate will be more electable.
I'm a little bit tired of listening to things that are pie in the sky that we never are going to pass or never going to afford. I think it's just disingenuous to promote those things.
It's a case former Vice President Joe Biden is also likely to make if he runs.
Well, I read in the New York Times today that that one of my problems is if I ever run for president, I like Republicans. Okay, well, bless me, Father, if I have sinned.
And joining me now is the acting White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney.
And actually, regarding acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, I will have a clip coming up. If you're following along on your clip list, it's clip 13, where I have done something that I don't normally do. I have edited together part of Mick Mulvaney's interview with Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press with some of his interview with Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday. So it's actually a combination Meet the Press Fox News Sunday clip. That's clip number 13. And it's actually kind of weird where Mick Mulvaney, I think he's doing like his Sergeant Schultz impression, like I know nothing about many, like the Saudi connection and Saudi Arabia, and also the whole Jeff Bezos thing, and the undocumented immigrants hired by Trump golf courses. He's like, I don't know anything, you know. And Mick Mulvaney looks a little bit like Sergeant Schultz, maybe. Well, I'll talk about that a little more when I get to that clip. But I will have those all edited together, including the Meet the Press one. But I want to go to the next news summary, and this is the CNN State of the Union news summary from Jake Tapper. It's much shorter. It's less than 90 seconds. And you'll see the State of the Union is kind of similar to what you heard from Chuck Todd there on Meet the Press. Focus on 2020. That's our State of the Union. It's the Democrats coming. And then you'll see the little bit more focus on the crisis in Virginia, especially given that this is less than 90 seconds. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together here.
In Washington, where the State of our Union is focused on 2020, Democrats are hitting the campaign trail across the country this weekend, traveling to early primary and caucus states as two major contenders enter the race this weekend. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts officially launched her bid Saturday, challenging the system she says is rigged for the rich and calling President Trump a symptom of what's wrong in America. Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota is expected to announce she's running later this afternoon. 2020 is also clearly on President Trump's mind. Saturday, he lashed out at Senator Warren on Twitter, alluding to her past claims of Native American status, for which she has apologized. The president appeared to make a joking reference to the tragic Trail of Tears relocation and genocide of Native Americans. One unexpected issue the 2020 candidates have been forced to confront on the trail: the continued controversy surrounding the top three officials in Virginia, all Democrats. There are now two women accusing Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax of sexual assault, and late Saturday, both women announced they would be willing to testify in any impeachment hearings. Fairfax maintains the encounters were consensual and says he should be given due process. One 2020 candidate who has had to respond to all of this on the trail, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg. He's a Rhodes Scholar and Navy veteran who served in Afghanistan and who is running to make history as the youngest president ever elected and the first openly gay man to serve in that role. And he joins me now. Mayor Buttigieg, welcome to State of the Union. Thank you so much for being
here. And like I said, Indianapolis Mayor Pete Buttigieg will be in a clip that I'm going to show about the Green New Deal near the end, like the third to last clip, I think it is. Yeah, clip number 15, if you're following along on your clip list at home. But I want to finish up the news summaries. That's the first two. I have three more. The next one is actually the Fox News summary. And you'll notice it's all about the shutdown. They don't talk about the Democrats. They don't talk about Jeff Bezos, although the Jeff Bezos issue does come up with the panel. And, this starts off with Chris Wallace saying hello again, because he narrates like the teaser introduction or whatever you call that first part of Fox News Sunday, where they just tell you the topics they're going to cover with these like flashy graphics and images going for like 2 minutes. And that's narrated by Chris Wallace. It included a brief reference to the Jeff Bezos story, but you'll notice this news summary here, both from Chris Wallace and from Mike Emanuel, the Fox News reporter. It's all about the shutdown, and this is, the government isn't shut down, but now they're negotiating the border wall, and that was a topic covered on all the news programs, but much more heavily on Fox News Sunday for reasons I'll discuss a little more with you after we watch that 2-minute, 5-second clip together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. There are reports today that congressional negotiators are closing in on a border security deal that would prevent another government shutdown next weekend. But any compromise is likely to fall well short of the $5.7 billion President Trump wants to build a wall. The big question, will the president agree to that deal? In a moment, we'll speak with acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, who brought House members to Camp David this weekend looking for areas of common ground. But first, let's get the latest from Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel. Mike.
Hi, Chris. Democratic sources say their side will not accept more than $2 billion for physical border barriers. They say the range under consideration is between $1.3 billion and $2 billion. President Trump insists the wall will get built one way or the other. With funding talks at a critical stage, President Trump has not been drawing red lines for congressional negotiators.
They're working on something, and both sides are moving along. We'll see what happens. We need border security. We have to have it.
The Senate Appropriations Chairman sounded hopeful heading into this important weekend of talks.
After the meeting with the President, the Vice President, I believe we've got some latitude to hopefully conclude this.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told reporters, leave it to the negotiators. She's staying out of it.
I have asked the administration to be as non-interventionist as I am on that. Just let them do their work.
Vice President Pence is signaling this border security battle won't end with this funding fight.
We're going to build that wall one way or another. I promise you.
Time is precious. Congressional negotiators recognize they need a deal by tomorrow in order to pass it through the House and Senate by the end of the week. Chris?
Mike, thank you. Joining us now, the White House Chief of...
Joining us there is the White House Acting Chief of Staff, and I don't even know what acting means in this capacity because he's not Senate confirmed. He doesn't have to be confirmed. It's like just between him and Trump whether he wants to be acting or real, and he actually answered a question about that and said he wants to serve till the end of the year, and why they're calling him acting, who knows. But like I said, that's clip 13. I'll have both Meet the Press and Fox News Mick Mulvaney medley coming up. But did you notice, like I said there, that there was basically no coverage of the Bezos thing, nothing about the Democrats who are declaring for president, not even really the Green New Deal. It was all about the shutdown and the border wall, and I think Fox News is trying to reassure the Trump base that something's actually going to happen with the big, beautiful wall he promised that he was going to build and Mexico was going to pay for. But anyway, you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And by the way, for those of you, there was somebody along the way who was saying, I hate when LiberalViewer analyzes the comedy. Well, look what happened during that last clip. I noticed I had this warning. So if you think I'm paranoid about copyright issues, I don't know if what clip created that warning. I never get any information from YouTube about that. And actually, by the time that last clip ended, the copyright warning disappeared. But I got like the yellow and the red warning that I'm using copyrighted material. Well, of course, it's fair use. Fair use is an exception to copyright. So anyway, that's why I do the analysis that I do. I talk for about as long as the clips, maybe a little bit longer. I think the clips today are 37 minutes long, so expect me to talk for at least 37 minutes, maybe a few minutes longer than that. That means the show should be like between an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes. I don't know. If you're watching this as a recorded show, you know how long the show is because you're living in the future. Back here in the past, we're still creating the show, me and the live viewers together. So I want to move on to my next news summary here. These next two news summaries, the last two news summaries, are making a point I was talking about earlier about how when these Sunday morning news analysis shows get an exclusive guest, all of a sudden that becomes like the biggest news of the week. And for ABC, they had David Pecker's lawyer, Elkan Abramowitz. And so the biggest news story, of course, was the Bezos thing. You'll see George Stephanopoulos says, well, there's the whole shutdown thing, and there's the fallout from the State of the Union, but then it's all about Bezos because they have David Pecker's lawyer coming up. That'll be clips 11 and 12. And then you can compare that to Face the Nation, where they have their exclusive with Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia. And so that's, of course, the biggest story that they focus on in their news summary, and actually in the entire coverage on Face the Nation. But first I'm going to start with the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. This is a minute and 48 seconds from this morning over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. It has been a packed one, and we're going to get the latest on the political chaos in Virginia, negotiations to avoid another government shutdown, all the fallout from the President's State of the Union this morning. But first, that wild story that tangles up the world's richest man, America's most famous tabloid, a longtime friend turned witness against President Trump, maybe even the rulers of Saudi Arabia. It all began last month when the National Enquirer published text messages between Amazon's founder Jeff Bezos and his mistress, Lauren Sanchez. A revelation that Bezos, who also owns the Washington Post, tried to preempt by announcing the end of his marriage. Then late this week, Bezos went public again, writing on Medium that agents for the National Enquirer and its parent company, AMI, threatened to release additional texts and explicit photos unless Bezos said publicly that the Enquirer's story about him was, quote, not politically motivated. Instead of bowing to the demand, Bezos lashed back. Of course, I don't want personal photos published, but I also won't participate in their well-known practice of blackmail, political favors, political attacks, and corruption. Bezos is also investigating why he was a target of the Enquirer, and his post references AMI Chairman David Pecker's close friendship with President Trump and the Washington Post coverage of Jamal Khashoggi's murder by operatives tied to the Saudi Crown Prince. Quote, an AMI leader advised us that Mr. Pecker is apoplectic about our investigation. For reasons still to be better understood, the Saudi angle seems to hit a particularly sensitive nerve. Federal prosecutors are now reviewing the Bezos accusations, which could jeopardize AMI's existing immunity deal, in which the company admitted to quashing damaging stories about Trump to help his presidential campaign. That is some of the background. Here to respond, David Pecker's attorney, Elkan Abramowitz. Thank you.
And I'll have a couple clips from Elkan Abramowitz right after this next news summary. And like I said, I'll have this kind of obscure, sophisticated dick joke about Elkan Abramowitz that I promised earlier. But you saw there how ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos in their news summary totally focused on the Bezos story. Well, CBS's Face the Nation, they did cover all the news pretty much over the course of the program, but the very beginning of the program was all focused on what's happening in Virginia, a brief news summary, and then putting it over to Gayle King and her interview, her exclusive interview with Ralph Northam. And if you have an exclusive interview with Governor Ralph Northam of Virginia, that is the biggest story for your network, as you can see in the 80-second news summary from Margaret Brennan going to Gayle King. And I've included the beginning of the Ralph Northam clip where he digs the hole even deeper. I've seen a lot of people already talking about this. See if you can figure out the two words he says in this clip that he should not have said, which I will tell you what I think they are, and you probably already heard about it if you've been on the internet today already, over in this clip.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We begin with the chaos in Virginia's government and the scandals that have rocked the top 3 Democrats in the Commonwealth: Governor Ralph Northam, Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, and Attorney General Mark Herring. CBS This Morning co-host Gayle King has just returned from Richmond, Virginia, where she spoke to the governor in his only television interview.
I know this has been a very difficult week for you in the state of Virginia, so where would you like to begin?
Well, it has been a difficult week, and you know, if you look at Virginia's history, we're now at the 400-year anniversary. Just 90 miles from here, in 1619, the first indentured servants from Africa landed on our shores in Old Point Comfort, what we call now Fort Monroe. And while
also known as slavery.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, while we have made a lot of progress in Virginia, slavery has ended, schools have been desegregated, we have ended the Jim Crow laws, easier access to voting. It is abundantly clear that we still have a lot of work to do, and I really think this week raised a level of awareness in the Commonwealth and in this country that we haven't seen certainly in my lifetime.
And why you think you still deserve...
Indentured servants? Indentured servants? How deep is this hole going to get for Governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam? Like I said, indentured servants, those are the 2 words. And when he talked about the history of Virginia, good and bad, he was talking about slavery and Jim Crow, and then he said, but now we have easier access to the ballot. That, I don't know. I thought he should have resigned sometime during this last week, and the complications from the story make it, you know, the fact that there are now these 2 apparently credible sexual assault allegations against the Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. That's one of the reasons he hasn't resigned. And then the third in line guy is also has some sort of blackface, dressed up as who is it? Is it Charles? What's the name of the rapper? Charles Blow? I can't remember. But anyway, it's all a big mess, and it's not what I predicted last week. I apologize for that. But like I said, I think the last 2 news summaries prove the point I was making earlier about how the different corporate news channels definitely focus on the most important story being the story that they have an exclusive interview on. Ralph Northam there with the exclusive interview with CBS, and the previous one it was ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos and their exclusive interview. I don't know what just happened there. With their exclusive interview, I got just some weird error message there, but their exclusive interview on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos with Elkan Abramowitz. And, you know, Elkan Abramowitz, like I said earlier, he's the lawyer for David Pecker. I guess that makes him mouthpiece for the Pecker mouthpiece, which does that mean that he's really urethral meatus? Wait, is this thing on? Urethral meatus? That was my obscure, sophisticated dick joke there. If he's a mouthpiece for Pecker, he's a urethral meatus. Anyway, I'm actually going to be committing a little bit of legal analysis after I show this next clip, because they're talking about the federal bribery statute and whether what happened between Jeff Bezos and the National Enquirer, I'm sorry, did I say bribery? I meant extortion. Extortion, blackmail. Not bribery, it's kind of like bribery, but yeah, the extortion and the federal extortion blackmail statute, which says that if you threaten someone for a thing of value, that is a federal crime. And the question is getting Jeff Bezos to say that the National Enquirer has no political motivations in its coverage, is that a thing of value? And you'll see here Elkan Abramowitz, the lawyer for David Pecker, a couple times, at least once and maybe twice in this clip, he almost says the phrase thing of value, but he realized, I guess before he came on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, he decided he's not going to say the phrase thing of value, which is the real issue in this case, because anyone who listens to the negotiation or reads the negotiation and the emails between the National Enquirer and Jeff Bezos can see that they're both trying to get something of value. And no, there is actually a legal issue as to whether it's something of value, which I'll talk about after I show the clip. But any layman and you'll see George Stephanopoulos even brings up, George Stephanopoulos says thing of value, but Elkan Abramowitz never says it. There's one point where he says th. He at least says the first phoneme, and there may be a second place here. Well, I'll double check as we watch this urethral meatus, the mouthpiece for the pecker here, talking about whether there's extortion and blackmail over here.
Out there, Jeff Bezos says extortion, blackmail.
It absolutely is not extortion and not blackmail. What happened was the story was given to the National Enquirer by a reliable source that had given information to the National Enquirer for 7 years prior to this story. It was a source that was well known to both Mr. Bezos and Ms. Sanchez.
Was it Michael Sanchez?
I can't discuss who the source was.
Uh-oh. I think I may have these clips. I think I might have the clips switched. Let me see, is it this one?
You said the source is someone who's been a reliable source to AMI, also close to
7 years.
No, there's something wrong with the editing of the clip because it's supposed to start with George Stephanopoulos' question. I think it starts a little early. I apologize for that, but here's the clip I introduced over here.
Out there, Jeff Bezos says extortion, blackmail.
It absolutely is not extortion and not blackmail. What happened was the story was given to the National Enquirer by a reliable source that had given information to the National Enquirer for 7 years prior to this story. It was a source that was well known to both Mr. Bezos and Ms. Sanchez.
Was it Michael Sanchez?
I can't discuss who the source was. It's confidential within AMI, so I'm not going to answer who the source was. It was somebody close to both Bezos and Ms. Sanchez.
Let me show some of the correspondence that Mr. Bezos published. He had this was a letter from AMI's lawyer John Fine, the deputy counsel, and it lays out two of the conditions he was setting. One, a public acknowledgments from the Bezos parties that they have no knowledge or basis for suggesting that AMI's coverage was politically motivated or influenced by political forces. And then point 3, AM agrees not to publish, distribute, share, or describe unpublished texts and photos. That seems like a pretty clear offer. AMI won't publish these photos if they get this statement from Bezos.
George, you have to understand the context. The story was already out, and there were...
Not the photos.
Not those photos. I think there were some photos that were in the original story. I think both Bezos and AMI had interests in resolving their differences. Bezos didn't want another story written about him or those pictures published. AMI did not want to have the libel against them that this was inspired by the White House, inspired by Saudi Arabia, or inspired by the Washington Post. It had nothing to do with it. It was a usual story that National Enquirer gets from reliable sources.
The National Enquirer believes that these photos were newsworthy. Yet they're offering there not to publish them in return for a thing of value from Jeff Bezos, letting go of the legal liabilities, saying that it wasn't politically motivated. How is that not extortion?
That is not extortion because all that AMI wanted was the truth. Bezos and Ms. Sanchez knew who the source was. Any investigator that was going to investigate this knew who the source was. It was not the White House. It was not Saudi Arabia. And the libel that was going out there slamming AMI was that this was all a political political hatchet job sponsored by either a foreign nation or somebody politically in this country. That is something that, and the story was already published. It's a news decision to decide how long you can go with the same story, so that each side, it was part of a legitimate negotiation. Each side had something that they wanted.
A source close to those conversations, familiar with those conversations, says this was a crime, not a negotiation.
The source is totally wrong. It's absolutely not a crime to ask somebody to simply tell the truth. Tell the truth that this was not politically motivated, and we will print no more stories.
If you don't say what you want us to say, we're going to publish these photos.
That's not it's part of a negotiation. Look, it's a news decision to decide how many times you're going to write the same story. The story was already out there. I think people misunderstand that this was a post-publication negotiation to resolve any of the outstanding issues. AMI was being blamed.
The clear threat was that there would be a new story coming.
The clear threat from Bezos' point of view is that we're going to link you to Saudi Arabia. We're going to say that you hacked all of these texts. We're going to slander the publication as much as we can. So that's why lawyers sit down and lawyers negotiate to try to resolve differences. That's exactly what this was.
How is that journalism, though? If you believe the photos are newsworthy, how is it journalism to say we're not going to publish this if you give us something we want?
Is it journalism to decide not to print the story 3 times? If the story was out there, there may be a different argument if we were talking about prior to the first publication, where hypothetically somebody could say, you give me $1 million and we won't publish this. That's not what this is. The story was already there. And then the issue was how much wasn't printed in the first story. You can make journalistic decisions as to how many times you're going to write the same story. That's not the job of the prosecutors or anybody else to determine.
You said the source is someone who's a reliable.
So, yeah, at least once in there he almost said thing of value, and it's pretty clear that he made a decision not to say thing of value, because it's hard to really parse this case from a layman's point of view. I haven't done the legal research. There was kind of an interesting, pretty tense argument also on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos that I'm not showing any clips from, but at a link down in the video description for ABC's This Week, you can see the analysis from Dan Abrams, the ABC News legal analyst, and then Alan Dershowitz. And what is up with Dershowitz? I don't know. It's like old Jews never die; they just become Republicans. I don't know. I can make that joke because I was raised as a Jew, so even though I'm now an agnostic. But anyway, if you want to see, it was kind of a weirdly antagonistic argument, because Dan Abrams' position, which I think is the correct legal position, is that it's somewhat ambiguous as to whether getting Jeff Bezos to publicly say there's no political motivation behind the National Enquirer's coverage. Is that something of value to the National Enquirer? Well, they were negotiating to get it, so it was at least of value to them. But what is that something of value for the blackmail extortion federal statute? Maybe, maybe not. It's an open legal question. That's what he said. It was extortion-ish, blackmail-ish. That was the Dan Abrams ABC argument. And then Alan Dershowitz said it's a First Amendment issue. It can't be extortion. And if you think it's extortion-ish and blackmail-ish, then it has to be unconstitutional to make it a crime under the First Amendment, which is almost true. It's actually under the Fifth Amendment that would be unlawful. If you can't tell whether what you're doing, whether the law makes what you're doing a crime, if you don't know how to conform your conduct to the law, that's a violation of due process, because the criminal statute is void for vagueness. That's what they call it, because if it's so vague you don't know how to not commit the crime, then you can't be charged with the crime, because that's unfair. Even a non-lawyer can understand why that's not fair. It's kind of like the YouTube community guidelines, or their monetization program where like they won't tell you what it is you did that got your video demonetized, and even if if your video, whatever, it's just vague rules are not constitutional because you have to know how to stop yourself from violating them. And I actually think that would have been a good argument, but wasn't really given on ABC. And the thing is, that's like an appeal argument. And so what I would say regarding all of this is that David Pecker and the National Enquirer, they could definitely be prosecuted for extortion. They could be convicted by a jury because a jury's going to think that if they're that's going to be a thing of value, and possibly they could win on appeal. They could appeal their conviction by a jury and say that there's this issue that it wasn't really a thing of value, and they had a lawyer advising them, and the lawyer said, so they couldn't form criminal intent. Maybe on appeal they might win, but by that time they could already be in prison, or I don't know, maybe they're too rich to end up in prison. It's like white privilege criminal law. It's not the criminal law that I used to practice when I was a public defender, but that's the legal analysis I wanted to give you. And what's really interesting about this particular case is that the National Enquirer and David Pecker already are like kind of on probation. They have an immunity agreement with the Southern District of New York because they already conspired with Michael Cohen to commit this campaign finance violation with Donald Trump. That's like he's an unindicted co-conspirator in that crime. And so if you wonder why this whole thing between Jeff Bezos and the National Enquirer that I, in the title to my video, termed as Trump versus Bezos ? It's because there's a very strong possible connection to Trump, and that's this next clip with Elkan Abramowitz, where the clip I thought might be the correct clip before, and I showed you the beginning of before I showed the last clip. Well, this is George Stephanopoulos trying to make that connection between this story and Donald Trump, and Elkan Abramowitz denies the whole thing, but then I have it edited together with a question that George Stephanopoulos asked later about the Michael Cohen campaign finance violation that the National Enquirer and David Pecker have an immunity agreement on, whether this blackmail extortion scheme violates that immunity agreement. And of course, you're asking a lawyer whether his client is guilty of a crime. So, of course, Elkan Abramowitz says no, but that's the real liability here, which I will discuss with you a little more after we watch that 100-second clip together over here.
You said the source is someone who's been a reliable source to AMI, also close to Ms. Sanchez. Jeff Bezos' security consultant, Gavin de Becker, has publicly named Michael Sanchez, the brother of Lauren Sanchez, as a possible target of his investigation. Now, Michael Sanchez is a vocal supporter of President Trump, an acquaintance of Roger Stone and Carter Page, and he told, the Washington Post reported that he was told by multiple people at American media that the National Enquirer set out to do, quote, a takedown to make Trump happy. Is that true? It's
not true. This was a source that had been giving information to the National Enquirer for 7 years. It was a person that was known to both Bezos and Ms. Sanchez, therefore giving his information more credibility, and that's exactly what happened.
You're not denying that it's Michael Sanchez, and Michael Sanchez told the Washington Post that the National Enquirer set out to do a takedown to make Trump happy. That's what he was told by people at American media.
I'm not going to comment on what Michael Sanchez said. I'm not permitted to tell you or confirm or deny who the source is. I can tell you it's not Saudi Arabia, it's not President Trump, it's not Roger Stone, but I cannot tell you who the sources.
Are you worried at all that these revelations have put the cooperation agreement of Mr. Pecker with the Southern District in jeopardy?
Absolutely not. We have an agreement with an understanding with the Southern District. I can't comment on it. I am not concerned that any of this...
They've spoken to you since this came out?
I'm not going to comment on any contacts with the Southern District.
Oh, well, that's too bad, because that's what I really want to know is because apparently the Southern District of New York that charged, if you look down in the links in the video description, you can even see Michael Cohen's plea where he says he was directed to commit campaign finance violations by Donald Trump, and one of them involved the catch and kill Karen McDougal agreement between the National Enquirer, or the catch and kill agreement that the National Enquirer made with Karen McDougal to like buy her story so it wouldn't be published before the election. And the National Enquirer and David Pecker got an immunity agreement, and apparently the Southern District of New York is investigating them right now for this Jeff Bezos extortion scheme, and it may very well violate their agreement, so they no longer have immunity, and then they're pretty screwed if the federal if a U.S. attorney, like what they call the Sovereign District of New York is coming after you, even if you don't end up convicted, if you get your rich white justice, it's going to cost you a lot of money and could cost you. This could be the end of the National Enquirer, which was another question George Stephanopoulos asked Elkan Abramowitz, which I didn't take that clip, but I hope you appreciated those two clips I did pick out for you. And I have sort of a more skeptical clip here from a Democrat. This is Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy answering a question. Well, first you'll see him talking about Saudi Arabia, and I actually have a clip coming up of the foreign minister. He's not. I'm trying to remember his title. I noticed I made a typo. If you're looking down in the video description during the live show here, you'll see that I called Adel Al-Jubeir. Instead of calling him the Saudi Arabia Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, I called him the Monister of State. Maybe I should have Monster of State. I don't know. He's going to be coming up talking about the Saudi Arabia connection in a couple clips. But first here is Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat from Connecticut, who you would think if there was any sort of real Saudi Arabian connection with the whole Jeff Bezos thing, he would say something about it, especially because you'll see at the very beginning of this clip, before I show him getting questioned by Jake Tapper, he talks about how the White House has missed their deadline to sanction Saudi Arabia for the Khashoggi killing, and he's saying the Senate might just go ahead without the administration at the beginning of this clip.
Just move forward with sanctions. And I think that's probably the most appropriate step. Congress doesn't have to wait for the president to fulfill his duty. We can just make a determination ourselves that Mohammed bin Salman ordered these murders, and there should be some kind of penalty and repercussion for that.
Speaking of murky situations with the Saudis, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos wrote an extraordinary essay on Medium this week accusing the National Enquirer parent company of trying to extort him over explicit photographs sent to his extramarital girlfriend. In that essay, Bezos refers to, quote, the Saudi angle. He seems to be suggesting, he and his team seem to be suggesting the Saudis had something to do with the National Enquirer obtaining these explicit photographs. What do you make of it?
I really don't know what to make of it, so I'm hoping that the Saudis had nothing to do with it. It's a very oblique reference, so it's hard for policymakers to understand. But what we do know is that foreign governments are constantly trying to infiltrate the American political process. And one of the reasons why we worry about President Trump not taking a stronger stand on what the Russians did in 2016 is that it seems to be an invitation for others to try to manipulate our political process in other ways. So I don't know anything about Jeff Bezos's sort of oblique claims, but I know that this is a constant problem that we have to be vigilant about.
You co-sponsored a resolution outlining a green...
And like I said, I'm not going to show Chris Murphy talking about the Green Deal, but I will show Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of Indianapolis, who's running for president. I'll show him talking about the Green New Deal in just a couple of minutes. But like I said, you saw Chris Murphy there, not really biting on the Saudi Arabian connection. And the clip after next, like I said, will be the foreign minister, or that's basically the title of Adel Al-Jubeir that I'll be showing in the clip after next. But before I do that, this is the next clip I want to show you is 5 minutes of the acting White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, and this is something I don't think I've done before. I've edited together his answer on Meet the Press with a couple of his answers over on Fox News Sunday. The reason is there's something weird about the beginning of the first two clips here, where first on Meet the Press and then on Fox News Sunday, to both hosts he says, you know, before the show I was just talking to you about compartmentalization. On Meet the Press he says how I can compartmentalize and you can't do that, he says to Chuck Todd. And then he also says something about compartmentalization to Chris Wallace over on Fox News Sunday, and compartmentalization is just like his way of saying I know certain things, but then about other things. It's almost like I said earlier when I was talking about this clip that it's the Hogan's Heroes Sergeant Schultz defense, like I know nothing, I see nothing. There are like certain topics where he doesn't really know anything, and it has to do with the Jeff Bezos thing, the Saudi Arabia connection. Chris Wallace even asks him about the undocumented immigrants who worked at Trump golf courses, and what's interesting is he uses the compartmentalization excuse for the Jeff Bezos thing on Meet the Press, and then he uses compartmentalization for the undocumented immigrants issue with Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday. And then when Chris Wallace asks him about Jeff Bezos, he can't say compartmentalization again, but he still doesn't really answer the question until he gets to muse about possible litigation on the constitutional issue having to do with extortion that I was talking about earlier. And then the very last clip here is Fox News bias that I will talk about with you after we watch this 5-minute Mick Mulvaney medley from Meet the Press and Fox News Sunday all together over here.
Let me shift to Saudi Arabia. On Friday, there was a deadline for the administration to provide a report on the death of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi that took place inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. We have reporting indicating that the administration did not meet this deadline. Why hasn't that happened, or did you meet a deadline and we don't know it yet?
I honestly don't know, and have not been familiar and worked into those negotiations. I do know that there are some requirements placed upon us by Congress, but I'm not aware of the status of that report.
None at all. You're not prepared to answer whether the president believes the Saudi government was behind the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi?
No, I think the better person, I can't remember, I think it's the State Department that's supposed to do that. You'd have to ask Secretary Pompeo.
All right, because I want to ask you about one thing that the Saudi foreign minister posted on Twitter. It was a rather threatening poster. Take a look at it. It was something else here, and this was from Adel. I know you're very familiar with him. Our leadership is a red line, and if you take a look at what it says there in the bottom, we warn against any attempt to link Khashoggi's crime to our leadership. The United States Congress has basically done that. The American intelligence community has basically done that. That is a threat to the United States?
I don't know what that is. It's the first time I've seen that. So, look, I know that Congress is looking into it. I know the State Department is looking into it. And beyond that, Chuck, it has not come to my desk yet.
You know about this Jeff Bezos story. He has implicated the National Enquirer and its owner, Mr. David Pecker, in some form of a blackmail or extortion scheme. Can you say definitively that the President of the United States knows nothing about David Pecker's reporting on Jeff Bezos?
You and I were talking about before the show about how I can function at my job and you struggle with your function because I can compartmentalize and you can't.
Right.
I have not had 1 second's worth of conversation with the President of the United States about the Jeff Bezos situation.
Not a single at all.
We run the government,
I
Chuck.
understand that.
In his State of the Union address, the president warned about the dangers of illegal immigration. Here he is.
Tolerance for illegal immigration is not compassionate. It is actually very cruel.
But the Washington Post reports this weekend the Trump Golf Club in New Jersey has employed a steady stream of illegal immigrants for years, and that the managers at the club knew they were illegal. How do you explain this apparent hypocrisy by President Trump and by his business?
One of the things you and I have talked about with my job is what I call compartmentalization, which is that I deal with running the White House, we deal with running the government. What you've just put up, it's a fair question, but it's a question that goes to the Trump organization and not to the Trump White House. We are not involved in the operation of those facilities.
Has the president ever discussed the fact that there apparently was this stream of illegals working for him?
No, I don't talk with the president about his business. I know that sounds unusual to people, but we have so much to do running the government, we don't get into these other matters.
All right. President Trump has repeatedly gone after Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. And here's a tweet from last month after the National Enquirer reported that Bezos was having an extramarital affair. So sorry to hear the news about Jeff Bezos being taken down by a competitor and that's the Enquirer, whose reporting, I understand, is far more accurate than the reporting in his lobbyist newspaper, the Amazon Washington Post. Given his support for the Enquirer, how does he feel about Bezos saying that the Enquirer was threatening to blackmail him with intimate photos?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. There's no love lost between the President of the United States and Mr. Bezos or the Washington Post. But in all fairness, I've never asked him that question. Again, I come back to the point that while these things make news and a lot of the folks in the media are interested in them, it's not what we do in the West Wing. We run the government. Are you troubled
at the idea that the Enquirer would threaten to expose explicit photos unless Bezos dropped an investigation?
Take me out of my role as chief of staff, and I think it's a very interesting question. That I think what little I've read about it was the National Enquirer is asserting a First Amendment privilege to do that. Mr. Bezos is saying he's been blackmailed. It's going to be very interesting to see that constitutional issue play out in the courts.
But it's not the question of whether they have the right. It's that they're saying, if you don't drop your investigation and don't say there's any political motive, we're going to do this. That's would seem to be extortion.
Again, yes, and that's the allegation Mr. Bezos has made. You and I are not going to resolve those issues here today.
We could try. Anyway, thank you. Thanks for coming in. I've got to say, I ask you a question, I get an answer.
It's always a good time.
Always good to talk to you, sir.
Thanks.
Up next, two members of the conference.
When he asked the question, did he really get an answer? I don't think so. I think the whole compartmentalization thing was like a total dodge, like I said. And what do you think? Does Mick Mulvaney look a little like a slightly younger Sergeant Schultz without the mustache from Hogan's Heroes? I think maybe he could. Maybe he could. You think there'll be a Hogan's Heroes reboot? They reboot everything from my childhood, so maybe he could be the Sergeant Schultz in the Hogan's Heroes reboot, because he definitely has the I know nothing, I see nothing, I compartmentalize everything thing. That's what I think it meant. You can let me know what you think it meant down in the comment section. Before I leave the Bezos, Trump, Saudi Arabia, Michael Cohen, blackmail, extortion scandal behind, I want to show you one more clip here. This is the Saudi Arabian foreign minister, although actually I guess his real title is Saudi Arabia Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Adel Al-Jubeir, also saying that he doesn't know anything about any sort of Saudi Arabian connection to the National Enquirer, and he's not doing a Sergeant Schultz impression, but he might as well be, I guess, as I'll discuss with you after we watch that CBS Face the Nation clip together over here.
Founded Amazon and owns the Washington Post is accusing AMI, which publishes the National Enquirer, for essentially trying to extort him with these incriminating photos. He personally said, though, that the Post's essential and unrelenting coverage of the murder, specifically of Khashoggi, was undoubtedly unpopular in certain circles. Did the Saudi government have anything to do with these leaks to AMI?
Absolutely not. This sounds to me like a soap opera. I've been watching it on television and reading about it in the paper. This is something between the two parties. We have nothing to do with it.
Well, can you say, though, that the Saudi government and any of its employees or its, contractors that it works with definitively that they had no contact with David Pecker or AMI?
That's as far as I'm aware, and I believe I would be aware. We have absolutely nothing to do with this. Maybe some of our citizens read the National Enquirer when they're in the United States. Other citizens watch the soap opera unfold on television, but that's it.
The full interview with Minister Al-Jubeir is on our website at facethenation.com. We'll be back in a moment.
So, yeah, if you want to see the full interview with Al-Jubeir, you can check out facethenation.com. Or actually, they put all of their clips up on their YouTube channel, which that's the link down in my video description. So if you want to see all the things Al-Jubeir said, I found that totally unbelievable. Margaret, Brennan, I think, could have followed up a little better there, because he was basically saying, no, as far as I know, and I would know if we were colluding with the National Enquirer to attack Jeff Bezos for the Washington Post's attack on Saudi Arabia for the killing of Khashoggi, or I don't know, Khashoggi, or however I can never pronounce it correctly, or there's like multiple pronunciations. So anyway, you can let me know how you think. If is it GIF or is it GIF? It's basically the same question for Khashoggi. And I happen to think it's GIF, so I'm going with Khashoggi. And now I want to show you the one clip of a Democrat running for president that I promised you. Speaking of things that are hard to pronounce, this is Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of Indianapolis, Indiana, who is running for president. Very young, he has experience as a mayor, but not the person you would immediately think of as a presidential candidate. Is he mayor of Indianapolis, or is it South Bend? He's mayor of some city in Indiana, and here he is explaining the Green Deal in a way that I think I've been watching them trash the Green New Deal on Fox News all week, and so I think this is actually a pretty good defense of the Green New Deal, which I will discuss with you a little more after we watch this third to last clip together over here.
Some issues. Several 2020 candidates are backing a new resolution which outlines what's called a Green New Deal. It was introduced by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the House and Senator Ed Markey in the Senate. This plan calls for, quote, removing pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from manufacturing and industry as much as is technologically feasible, with a 10-year outline. Obviously, something like that would completely overhaul industries across the Midwest, including in Indiana. Do you have any concerns about how the Green New Deal might affect your constituents or your state?
Well, like a lot of other things that have come along and impacted us in the industrial Midwest, trade comes to mind. We got to make sure this time around that it's done in a way that benefits us, that benefits workers, more than it harms them. Look, there's always going to be change and disruption. As a town that grew up around the auto industry, producing Studebakers until the 1960s, we know firsthand what those disruptions can mean. But there's also tremendous opportunity here. Look, we're not only being disrupted by economic change, we're being disrupted by climate change. We have had multiple cases, 2 different cases of floods, historic floods here in South Bend, of the kind that we're told to expect every 1,000 years or so, and they happened within 18 months of each other. So this is a national emergency, and I think the elegance from a policy perspective of the concept of the Green New Deal is it matches a sense of urgency about that problem of climate change with a sense of opportunity around what the solutions might represent. Even right now, one of the biggest recent announcements in our county of added union jobs in the auto industry was at a facility making electric vehicles. I think a Green New Deal would promote that, and so that could be good news for us here in the industrial Midwest.
Do you endorse the Markey Ocasio-Cortez Green New Deal?
Yes, I think it's the right beginning. Look, it's a framework. Obviously, the Green New Deal, as we've seen it so far, is more of a plan than it is a fully articulated set of policies. But the idea that we need to race toward that goal, and that we should do it in a way that enhances the economic justice and the level of economic opportunity in our country, I believe that's exactly the right direction to be going in. Everybody's going to have their...
Go ahead.
Everybody's going to have their own twists or features they're going to add. As a mayor, I'd like to see it funding more things that would help our cities become sustainable. And there are other developments that are going to have to come along to establish exactly how we can meet those goals. But they are the right goals, especially if you come at this from a generational perspective. You know, for me, the question of what the world is going to look like in 2054, which is when I'm going to reach the current age of the current president. That's not a theoretical question. That's a personal question. And it's very clear that we can't go on like this. I mean, these weather extremes we're experiencing now are what we were warned about to expect in these years in the 70s and 80s by science. I shudder to think about the fact that, God willing, I'll be alive to see the consequences in the 2050s of the predictions that are being made right now.
You've said that young people don't see as much.
And you can see more of Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, running for president as a Midwestern gay Democrat. Like I said, I think he may be running for vice president, but I think he did a good job of defending the Green New Deal more as a structure than a set of specific policies. And like I said, I've seen it trashed really heavily over on Fox News, but we need some sort of, I mean, people are really going to die in the next, what do they say, by 2030, based on some of the climate change predictions. It's going to have, if we don't make some major change by 2030, it's going to be too late to stop real calamitous consequences. So I don't think it's too aspirational to try to figure out policies to avert that predicted disaster. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I am now going to move on to the final topic, the Adam Schiff collusion preview. The two clips I have for you here of Adam Schiff. First, talking about the Trump finances he wants to investigate, and then I think giving the best, like I think I call it like a third grade level explanation of how the no collusion argument is pretty much rebutted by things we already know. Not if you want to like find Trump guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of conspiracy or whatever the crime is that would be what collusion is, but the second clip I'm going to show, I think, is a really good explanation of all the strong evidence of collusion already found. But first, here's Adam Schiff talking about, I think he's got the talking points straight as to why the Democrats need to look into Trump's finances, not to look into what a dishonest businessman he was in general, which of course is probably true, or what a big liar he is about how rich he is, which of course is probably true. But kudos to Adam Schiff for bringing that up. But then he also gives the real reason that Democrats should give for the investigation over here.
Welcome back. With Democrats now in control of the House and its committees, there's been no shortage of investigations into President Trump now or soon to be underway. They're looking into the president's tax returns, his inaugural committee, the Trump Organization, Russian influence in the campaign, and a lot more. At the center of many of these investigations is going to be the House Intelligence Committee. And at the head of that committee is its chairman, Adam Schiff of California. Congressman Schiff, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you.
You seem to be the committee chairman that the president likes to talk about the most these days. And he had a two-part tweet that actually is a good way of unpacking everything you're working on right now. Here's what he tweeted. So now Congressman Adam Schiff announces, after having found zero Russian collusion, that he is going to be looking at every aspect of my life, both financial and personal, even though there is no reason to be doing so. Never happened before. Unlimited presidential harassment. The Dems and their committees are going nuts. He puts that in quotes. The Republicans never did this to President Obama. There would be no time left to run government. I hear other committee heads will do the same thing, even stealing people who work at White House, a continuation of witch hunt. All right, lots to unpack. But explain the parameters of your investigation, where you've expanded. How far back into his finances do you plan to look?
Look, our priority is to make sure the President of the United States is working in the national interest, that he is not motivated by some pecuniary interest or fear of compromise or actual compromise. That's the length and breadth of it. So in terms of the President's business, we're not interested in our committee in whether he's a tax cheat or he's not worth what he says he is or those issues. What we're interested in is, does the president have business dealings with Russia such that it compromises the United States? And the perfect example is something we know about already. And that is, as a presidential candidate, while he was telling the country he had no business dealings with Russia, He was pursuing the most lucrative deal, I think, of his life and seeking the Kremlin's help to make it happen. That's a different form of collusion, but it is equally compromising to the country because it means the President of the United States is looking out for his bank account and not for the United States of America.
You have said you're not convinced Robert Mueller's...
And that's a great distinction that Democrats should use repeatedly, I think, between Donald Trump, the dishonest businessman, and Donald Trump, whose business biases are coming ahead of the interest of the United States in his dealings as president. And also, like I said, Adam Schiff, I think, gave a great simple explanation of all the evidence of collusion for all the people out there who think no collusion, no collusion. Well, here is the simple explanation in 92 seconds in the final news clip for the night over here.
The president keeps implying that the Senate Intelligence Committee has already found no collusion. He did it again this morning in a tweet. He did it yesterday, I think, in a tweet, and he's naming Richard Burr by name. What is your understanding of where and how closely are you working together with the Senate Intel Committee?
You know, we are trying to work collaboratively with the Senate, but look, I think when the president says there's no collusion, what he means is Bob Mueller has not yet proven beyond a reasonable doubt that I am guilty of the crime of conspiracy. Well, that's a pretty high bar. But when people say there's no collusion, they must have a different word for the kind of corrupt coordination of effort between the Trump campaign and the Russians, because when Mike Flynn was secretly talking to the Russian ambassador and trying to undermine bipartisan sanctions on Russia and lying about it, that was a form of collusion. When the Trump family and campaign manager were meeting in Trump Tower to get dirt on Hillary Clinton as part of what was offered as the Russian government effort to help the campaign, that was a form of collusion. When the president himself and his business are trying to make money from the Russians and get Russian help during the campaign and promising a new relationship with Russia and talking about doing away with sanctions, that's a form of collusion. It's certainly a form of corrupt combination, but ultimately it'll be up to Mueller to determine if that's a crime.
You were among the most public in questioning.
Collusion, corrupt combination. I think that was a very good, simple explanation of collusion. I hope you appreciate the 3 topics and 17 clips I picked out for you. I appreciate all of my live viewers, my recorded show viewers, those of you who give me a thumbs up, who give me a supportive comments. I especially appreciate the live viewers who gave the super chat contributions along the way. I noticed these so far here. So thanks for that. And I especially appreciate the variety of contributions there. And I did want to give you the bonus Dash and Sandy clip for the Dash and Sandy fans out there. Here it is, 30 seconds of Dash and Sandy waiting for an Amazon package. I think this could be another Amazon penis joke. I don't know. Here's the Dash and Sandy at the front door waiting for a package. So there you go. That's the show. If you want to support the show, like I said, you can give me those super chat contributions like those people I showed earlier. You can support me directly through PayPal at a link down in the video description, or to give me the most reliable support, you can be a monthly patron on Patreon. I have rewards at the $5 level. You get these weatherproof vinyl stickers. At the $10 level, you get the sticker and this pocket Constitution. If you want to support the videos, I'm hoping to continue making these weekly videos of the corporate news media coverage all the way through the Trump impeachment, which seems almost inevitable in 2019. So think about that, and I will be back next week and for every week for the foreseeable future. And until then, until next week, or until I have some reason to upload a video between the Sundays, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.